Even within like the first minute or two of the interaction, I want to imply something that's true would lead to sex. It doesn't have to be like, you want my penis. That's like a little overt, right? But if you just imply, look, we're both good-looking people, and but let's just start as, in a friendly way. That is implying something that if true would lead to sex. If she accepts the premise, you're both good-looking people, you're both attracted to each other, it makes sense that this will now go in a sexual direction, all right? So if you start making implications like that, one of a few things will happen. There's really basically three things that can happen, right? They'll either reject that implication in some way, in which case you get a shit test, which is actually fine, and we'll deal with that in a minute, okay? They accept it, which is the best possible outcome. You say something that if true would lead to sex, they say that's true, well, that's gonna lead to sex. The third thing they can do is sort of try and ignore it. If they try and ignore it, that's also fine, because it still exists. It still is present in the conversation. There was still that reminder of something sexual. There's still that reminder of something man to woman. And I like to think of it as kind of chiseling away, right? You're just like gradually, it's not like taking a sledgehammer and having one big move that just like blows the set open, but you're just chiseling away and chiseling away and chiseling away. And each one of those little moves, if she doesn't notice it or react to it, well, it's a non-negative. You're in the same place in terms of what you can get away with as you were before you said it, so you've lost nothing, but you've injected one more piece of premise into the set, one more piece of man-to-womanness into the interaction with no negative consequence. So that's also fine. I think a lot of people have trouble with that one when they're saying these things and the girl just is ignoring it or being platonic, and a lot of really hot girls do that. A lot of really hot girls respond by semi-ignoring or just keeping it platonic or whatever, but you have to understand they still heard it. They can't unhear it. All right? And so as long as they didn't react to it, as long as it wasn't negative, it's just one more little bit moved into the set. With really hot girls, sometimes you just need to have that patience to have a fairly normal conversation and just keep chiseling away and chiseling away and chiseling away, and don't give up. Just because you said a bunch of instigating things or slightly premisey things and they didn't get a big reaction doesn't mean they didn't work, right? They didn't get a big negative reaction, the girl didn't leave. That's enough that it worked, right? She's now talking to someone who's said sexual things 5 or 6 times and hasn't left. That's enough of a positive indicator. That's all you need. If you say something sexual, they can accept the sexual frame, reject or give you shit about it, or ignore that it ever happened. If you say something arrogant, they can accept your arrogance, reject your arrogance, or ignore that it happened. Right? If you say something polarizing or offensive, they can just go along with it and fall into your frame. They can resist the frame, or they can ignore it ever happened. Right? So with any of these things, those are kind of the options. Right? And accepting it is usually good for you. Rejecting it is usually non-bad for you, because if you can handle the shit test properly or handle whatever they throw at you, it's an opportunity to convey yourself as in a positive way and as a high-value person. And then the nothing answer it's the most annoying kind of and frustrating, because it means you still have a lot of work to do and it's hard to deal with. But if you're speaking strictly about it, it is still a positive for the set, the fact that you said this thing. Make sense? Yeah. It still has improved it over having not said it. Like leaving. That's the bad reaction. Other than that, not really, right? Or if they're actually truly, actually upset in a completely non-flirty, angry way, that's like one step short of walking away, right? But anything that's like shit testy or challenging or something like that, that's actually like civil and conversational, is actually to your benefit, if and only if you know how to handle it. If you fail shit test, it's not to your benefit. If you can pass shit test, then it is. What do we have here? So when you walk into a set, you want to, early on in the set, be willing to say and do things that are like sexual in nature and provocative. And specifically, what I really want you guys to do is take on a frame, take on an attitude or a belief or something you're putting into the set that, if true, would lead to sex. That could be any number of things, all right? When you say something like a disqualifier, like you and I would not get along, right? It's kind of funny because it's not an if true would lead to sex directly, but the fact that there's this tension about whether you and she would get along, whether that's even a topic of conversation, that's implying that this is going in a sexual direction, right? And you could get shit tested on that. If you'd say something arrogant about yourself, right? If you refer to yourself, I refer to myself as like a witty guy or an attractive guy or something like that. And sometimes more subtly, sometimes less subtly. But that's one of those things that if she accepts your frame that you're attractive, that you're a good looking guy, she's going down that path towards sex, right? If you misinterpret that she said something sexual to you and she doesn't protest, allows that misinterpretation to become the fact of the conversation, that's an if this is true would lead to sex. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is how you kind of provoke shit tests. Or ideally, don't provoke shit tests. Ideally, what you do is you start throwing these things in, and the shit tests don't come, because that means she's just accepting them, whether passively or actively. Okay? But if you sit there and don't instigate anything, if you just sit there and don't do things that trigger emotions that aren't if true would lead to sex, well, if nothing if true would lead to sex happens, then no sex happens.